Just want to put up this tweet here from Justin Lum there, kind of outlining those 6 counts, all guilty. Lori Vallow finding out her fate today in the courtroom there in Ada County. Let's go out to Boise, Idaho now, live with Justin Lum himself, and he's been covering this story, like I've always said, Justin, from the very beginning. Really the culmination of so much today happening there in that courtroom. Give us a sense of what went down and what happens next.
And just to set the scene for you, Andrew, really the culmination of thousands of hours of investigating by law enforcement, and you saw those representatives in the courtroom today along with family members. Let's talk about Lori Vallow's reaction. I mean, she didn't seem to show any remorse, very similar to the MO and what we've seen from her throughout this trial and in other events, just, you know, smiling here and there, but really the half frown or whatever you want to call it, arms crossed. Not crying like she has a couple times that we think that she's shed some tears. But today that verdict was read and she was walked out of the courtroom, and then there was just all of this emotion, and she's now convicted ahead of Mother's Day weekend. I don't know if you call that poetic justice, but I know that the family of JJ Vallow would say so. Now, you could hear a pin drop in that courtroom when she was first brought in, and you're seeing some photos of her now. The jury finding her guilty on 3 counts of conspiracy to commit murder in connection to her kids, JJ Vallow and Tylee Ryan, and Tammy Daybell, the first wife of Vallow's current husband, Chad Daybell. 2 more counts of first-degree murder in her children's deaths, and finally, that grand theft. Now, this has been such a complex case, lasting more than 3 years, involving multiple law enforcement agencies spanning from Arizona to Idaho to Hawaii to Utah, with major involvement from the FBI. Vallow used her religious beliefs to justify the murders, and her alleged co-conspirator, Chad Daybell, he has his trial up next at some point next year. Now, after the confirmation of the verdict, like I said, she was walked out of the Ada County Courthouse here in Boise for the last time, and then we really saw the family members of the victims crying and hugging prosecutors and law enforcement that investigated the case. And I asked JJ Vallow's grandfather, Larry Woodcock, what his final message to Lori is.
Turn out the lights. The party's over. They say that all good things must end. Lori, it ended.
Now, just so you know, that connection for that song, Larry Woodcock and JJ Vallow, they sang that song together, one of JJ's favorite songs as he was growing up, the 7-year-old boy with special needs. So it was fitting for Larry to sing that today, and he'd been playing it in the courthouse during break, staying optimistic. Now, as for sentencing, Andrew, that will take place 3 months from now, around 3 months at some point in Fremont County, Idaho, where these 3 murders happened. And meanwhile, we have some breaking news out of Maricopa County in Arizona regarding another murder.
Yeah, Justin, I want to talk about that in just a moment, but I just want to kind of go into a little bit of the reaction or lack thereof from Vallow. Now, we saw her cross her arms, and I'm not a body language expert or anything, but that might have been all we were going to get for a reaction, right?
Yeah, all eyes were on her. Everyone wanted to see how she would react to the verdict. She sat back in her chair, kind of leaned back, looking at the judge or the jury, and she stood up and had her arms crossed when the verdict was being read by the clerk. And she may have dropped her arms a little bit at moments and held her hands together, closed her eyes for a second or a moment, and really that was it. No tears came out after the verdict came out guilty on all 6 counts, and that was it. That is the last that we see of her for some time until sentencing.
Yeah, and Justin, sentencing in about 3 months' time, like you said, though, and I think so many this week were kind of struck by the fact that the defense was not going to call any witnesses. Essentially, they weren't going to even present the case. I was struck by that fact. Did you hear from people in the courtroom, from observers of this? Did they expect that to happen going into later this week?
I'll tell you what, that was probably the biggest shocker of the trial for many people. Through my sources, I had a feeling that because she would not testify, there would not be any witnesses called up. If she did testify, I could see some witnesses called up. Now, that's not my thinking, but that's based on what I've learned from sources in this trial. And so, yeah, to not have one cross-examination either after the state rested, a little bit mind-boggling. So all eyes were on the closing arguments, and you heard those yesterday by the defense, basically pinning it on Chad Daybell and accusing him of being the scapegoat and the reason that Lori Vallow, went down this path.
Yeah. And then they made the announcement they were going to stream the moment the verdict was read out there in court. All along, and that has been somewhat of a pain for reporters who want to cover this. No cameras in the courtroom. The verdict, yes, we saw it today. We're about to replay it for the viewers. Did that surprise you?
I would say, I guess that's a pleasant surprise that we got the live streaming. I did not see that coming. At some point around early this week, we said, hey, well, for the verdict, could we actually see this happen, live? Could the public see it? But it wasn't a broadcasting camera. It was a news camera. It was, Zoom basically, but better than what we've had, because we've had no cameras inside the courtroom since the banning September of 2022. So better than nothing. And then we had a pool camera for still photography. So things came together today to really show the public who've been following this case what happened inside and what it looked like.
Yeah, and Justin, what about her legal team, her attorneys? Did they say anything after the verdict was read? Are they planning to file an appeal?
That was not brought up. That is something yet to be determined.
Okay, and Justin, you had brought up this as well, because I was going to pose the question to you, what happens with Lori Vallow now? This is just one jurisdiction. This was just one trial. We obviously have the Chad Daybell trial that's happening in 2024. And then some news out of Maricopa County today in Arizona. I want to put up your tweet here and read it for the viewer. You said, breaking, MCAO says it has left the state of Idaho now about intent to prosecute Lori Vallow in Arizona for the murder charge in the Charles Vallow case. Extradition process will begin after Vallow is sentenced and transferred to the Idaho Department of Correction. It can take several weeks to months. So you indicated this is not over for Vallow.
Yeah, this is not over. A lot of people have been asking, will she be brought to justice in the murder of her fourth husband, Charles Vallow? She was indicted in 2021 for conspiracy to commit murder. Chandler police say she conspired with her late brother, Alex Cox, in the fatal shooting of Charles Vallow. He was shot twice in the chest. Alex Cox, her brother, did not call 911 for 45 minutes while Lori Vallow left the scene, took JJ Vallow to school, and took Tylee Ryan to Burger King, took them both to Burger King. They went to a store, a Walgreens or CVS, to buy flip-flops and returned to the scene. She was smiling and laughing on body camera footage. So that is a big case, because Charles Vallow sounded the alarm to authorities. He said that his wife was acting very strange. It was disturbing, and he even filed divorce papers saying that she tried to threaten him and say she would murder him with her powers. And all of these came out in the divorce papers. So really getting justice for Charles, that is now at the top of mind for family members.
And Justin, just lastly, personally for you as a reporter who has covered this from the very beginning, I know it's hard, we want to maintain our objectivity, but this has been a big part of your life. You were featured in that Netflix documentary. Did you ever think we would get to this day, you would see this final culmination there in Idaho?
I can tell you that I imagined it, that would happen at some point, but throughout all these twists and turns and Lori Vallow being found incompetent and competent and the delays, and I mean, there were just so many points where you said, hey, will this ever happen? And here we are, a little more than 3 years after her arrest in Hawaii and extradition to Idaho, that it is here. And I won't lie to you, it's a bit emotional for me as a journalist covering this for so long, since December 2019. It weighs on you every day, trying to make sure that you stay on top of such a case like this with multiple law enforcement agencies involved. It can be a lot of work as you juggle other reports as well.
Sure.
And I'm definitely I'm relieved, and I'm proud of our station. I'm proud of our team for doing the journalism we did.
Yeah. And we're so thankful that you brought it to our viewers here on Live Now. Justin Lum there in Boise, Idaho. Justin, as always, we appreciate it. Have a good weekend. Much deserved.
Thanks, Andrew.